Welcome to Zen Footsteps. My podcast is designed to invite you to explore new perspectives and challenge the way you see the world. Through engaging conversations with thought-provoking guests, we're going to delve into the idea that you can transform your thinking and inspire personal growth. From redefining success to uncovering unconventional paths to fulfillment, each episode is a step towards expanding your mind and embracing the journey of discovery. So join us as we walk alongside innovators, thinkers, and change makers who can help you see life in a whole new light. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Zen Footsteps. Today I've got Georgie with me. Now, Georgie trained at the Leiths School of Food and Wine. She also taught there as a senior teacher for over 12 years. And she's also cooked for people like James Martin School, sorry. And also, this is one that really fascinates me, the Indian Himalayas as well. I really want to know more about that. So for 14 years, she's collaborated with nutritional therapists seeking to cook and find a powerful self-awareness and passion about food and the energy of food, because she blends this really with science, which I think is also important too. And there's traditional Chinese medicine within that. That's what really drew me to her, actually, was the way that she blended those. Yoga, Reiki, and also a sourdough mastery to help people nourish mind, body, and soul. Georgie, hi.
Hi.
Welcome. So, who is Georgie? Who are you?
Oh, well, I think we live in a world where everybody likes to give the answer to that in like a quick little strap line. I think I've always really struggled with doing that because I'm, as you've just read out, quite complex, I guess. I deeply care about connection and other people and really getting inside people to understand how they tick and how they work. A lot of what I do is about giving people confidence and enabling them to take away any shame or feeling of less than. And I've always thought that cooking is one of the best ways of doing that because it brings in all the forms of creativity, it lights people up. If anybody can cook, and I've taught in lots of different places, and I've been at Leiths when I taught there. There would be 16 people in front of me, all of them with exactly the same ingredients, all weighed out exactly the same, all with exactly the same recipe. But every single person would come back with something different. But they'd all be so proud of what they've created. And it's the bringing that magic back to somebody, that little like, oh, yes, I got it right. That's probably what makes me tick the most, the magic of things.
It's interesting because I actually think that the missing ingredient, that picture of all these people together, and often the missing ingredient sometimes, and I know this when I cook myself, is that the missing ingredient is love.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
when I cook with a giving, a nurturing, of service, I tend to find the food is better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I totally believe that the energy you put into something, and it goes for anything, it can be for
Mm.
gardening, it could be for all sorts of things, but especially with a home cooked meal, is just it goes into your body. I really believe that. And that's why I think probably if we look at the way the world is now, we've got so much ultra processed food and food that's made without that connection. I just don't believe that energetically it's doing what it should have been doing. Food, cooking and creating food was always a kind of an alchemy. Eternal.
What's gone wrong with food for you? I mean, I look at ultra processed food. Where do you think it's sort of where did the disconnect come?
But to be honest, I think money is quite a big issue. Because it's money and power go so hand in hand, but in the wrong hands, the wrong way. And I think people lose their way. So many wonderful companies. I'm sure, we could reel things off. The beautiful little artisan thing companies or people that start their business with so much care, so much love, and then they take it to such a stage and then it's sold out. They sell out and they hand it over to a big conglomerate and then they churn the company out. And it's normally at that exact moment that the company loses everything. It just goes. And people benefit for a little bit off the energy, the old energy of said company. But then it goes. It's just not the same thing anymore. And I think it comes down to that magic, that love, that the energy that people put into things. I very much come back to energetics. I've worked with lots of clients, and I'm sure you're the same, that actually people can have the healthiest diet, but actually can come down to what they're saying to themselves, that stuff isn't working properly in their bodies. So again, down to this energy, and the other way around. You can have the most unhealthy diet, but if you're, I mean, I look, look at some of the Rolling Stones, for example. I'm sure they've had some pretty wild nights, drinking, smoking, all the rest of it still, and they're still going, but they're doing what they love, and they're bringing it to the world. So I think there's quite a lot of it in that. But yeah, coming back to a question, I actually think money is a big problem, and power ultimately. People's illusion of what power is, and power is ego. It is cracked to the ego. It just loves it. And it's similar to what we're going on with AI at the moment. All like, oh yeah, we're going to get loads of information. We're all going to be the cleverest and the biggest and the shiniest and then it ends up we all just actually probably if anything we're just getting more and more distracted.
I agree, and I think also we're pulling away from each other. I mean, I think that the wonderful thing about food is its commonality. We all need to eat, and we all need love. And I think that AI distracts, but AI is a tool. I use
Oh
AI
yeah.
in a kind of a good way, in the sense that, if I was to say I would never have a pizza, I'd be lying, right?
Yeah.
The difference is it's once in a while, or
Yeah.
it's homemade.
Totally. And this thing, I'm actually not 100% against ultra processed food because I've had a lot of joy with processed food in my life. But I think the word consciously is one that I fall back on quite a lot. With a level of maturity and consciousness, then all of these things are fine. Same with AI. I will consciously go onto it. But, like it's a slippery slope. They are literally there designed to keep us as long as possible. So it has to be a conscious thing. Otherwise, you're just in. And then you're giving your energy away to someone or something that's ultimately just data mining and using you somehow. So I think consciousness is an area that I'm very interested in. And that really comes back to, again, where I'm putting my energy. It's very easy to just it. And then when you begin to become more aware of where it's going and how important it is, you can slightly hone it, I guess, a little bit better. But yeah, food is and cooking actually connects us to each other. So you can feast together, you can chat together, you can eat on your own. It has all sorts of emotions in it, but it also connects us to our planet. And that's why I bring often the traditional Chinese medicine side of things a bit in, because it reminds us that we're connected to our planet. But when you live in cities and, like I live in the countryside like you do now, and I can still get an Ocado same day delivery now, which is insane. So if I wanted to eat sushi all day long in the middle of winter, which is not really what my body would need, I can. So we're becoming completely disconnected to what we would eat seasonally, even in places outside of cities. It's a wild time. It's wild. Um, and ironically, most humans are trying so hard to bring goodness back, but we're all becoming more and more distracted by doing it. It's like we're making life so much more complicated.
Yeah, I think we're not. I think we're just not being most of the time. We
Mm.
just need to just. As I've got older, I've realized that I know less,
Yeah,
because in the sense, if you're an empty vessel, you can learn. But when
yeah,
you're young and your ego is full, you never allow anything to come into that vessel to be able to learn.
yeah,
And rather with like the Chinese tradition, really, it's things like I generally don't have ice cubes, for example, in my drinks,
yeah, me too.
because that cold, I don't have I can have a cold drink, but I don't have the ice going in there.
Mm-mm.
And I think the Chinese and that whole philosophy is becoming more understood. My slight concern, I suppose, in places like Japan now, we're getting illnesses that we didn't get before because the Western diet is starting to intrude in those areas.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've done quite a lot of work out in the Himalayas and places and in India, and every time I've gone to visit, I mean, when I first visited was about 20 years ago, and there was so much culture and tradition, and it all felt very kind of alien, but exciting and vibrant and beautiful. And when I went back a few years ago, I was in the middle of nowhere. We were in Ladakh, so in the middle of nowhere, but still a lot of these Western influences have come in. And I don't know, I look at the Western influences and I grew up very much, West is best. We're going to bring all this amazing modern stuff to all these people that don't have it. And I get it. And now I kind of think, God, what have we done? Like, you just kind of got rid of so many, you just dumbed down so many of these beautiful traditions and cultures. And I don't know. I hope there's a resurgence that goes the other way. It feels like there is a little bit, actually. The fact that I, as a white person sitting in England talking about traditional Chinese medicine feels a bit odd. Um, I hope that it's going to have a bit of a loop backwards.
How did you get to the Himalayas? Tell me that story, because it's one of my dreams is to go to the Himalayas. I was called Zen Footsteps for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that. Tell me, how did that happen?
Well, so when I was 27, quite a long time ago, 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, a friend of mine worked for an Indian travel company called Banyan Tours, I think they were called, and her boss was an amazing man called Setna, and he had created a very private lodge retreat in the middle of like nowhere. So it was like a 10-hour overnight train from Delhi, a 10-hour drive to this new place of roads that were like, everywhere. And then a 2-hour walk to get to where we had to go. So, if you break your ankle, you were really, it wasn't going to be, we got really bad food poisoning. It wasn't the place you wanted to have that. But it was unbelievably stunning. You got these incredible Indian architects to make these beautiful stone and wood houses, but no electricity, nothing. You know, I think we did have Wi-Fi, I guess. I think, um, but it was just stunning and so high up. You were above the eagles. I mean, it was just insane. Insane how they'd even managed to get anything out there. And so I worked there training their head chef, who was a man called Yeshi, who actually was a Tibetan monk. And he was one of the most amazing men. He hardly spoke any English, and I hardly spoke, I mean, I didn't speak any Tibetan or Indian. And we just communicated through food. And we had a complete love-in. We absolutely loved each other. It was just a real, like, mutual understanding of this excitement around food. So for that year and then the year later, I went back. And then I had this big pause. And it was a complete learning experience. We had, only log burning stoves, no oven, nothing that you'd ever expect. Like we didn't have hand blenders or, sugar was big chunks of cane sugar they'd have to grind up. Um, and and I went back to another one of their amazing places in Ladakh, so it's a little bit up further away, a couple of years ago, and saw Yeshi, and it had been 15 years since I'd seen him. And we both cried because it was a real like, oh my God, we're back. And I think he must be in his 60s now. Such a beautiful man. Like you can see it in his face, it just lights up. His such a smiley face. And we just, set about making croissants in the middle of nowhere and just laughed and giggled. And it was really, really magical, actually. So yeah, we were very lucky. I've been very lucky to get that time in beautiful locations. It was stunning. It wasn't kind of backpacking. It was really stunning. Very lucky.
Is that how your love of the Chinese medicine came in? Was it that time in Tibet?
Um, I think I've always been really drawn towards more holistic, slightly spiritual side of things ever since I was really little. I really don't know why. Um, uh, that, as a kid into fairies or as a young teen, remember kind of not thinking it's good at all, but Ouija boards and doing things, tinkering with energy. Always just thinking, what is that? What is that? And I never really knew how to get into it because it was like a whole, how do you get into energetics? Like it's not like, I don't know, it's just hard to understand. I tried to understand and learn about Ayurvedic food and ways of life, but the books are pretty dry, the original texts, hard. I went on a few courses and then I went and did a yoga teacher training because I thought that's quite spiritual. It sounds quite like my up my street. And I went down that route and was like, yeah, definitely more where I want to be going. And then I went into Reiki. And actually, my stepmother is Chinese Malay. So I grew up with a quite strong, she used to boil up chicken's feet when we were ill. Put all sorts of pork floss on top of things. And she'd be, this is very good, it's very heaty. And I'd be like, what is she talking about? And now I make, juk up, which is like congee up for my kids. And they ask for it, Mum, can you make that weird stuff up? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. So it kind of seeped through, but I've always been really interested in the more alternative treatments. And actually, I I think from a young age, I was very asthmatic, really from birth, and I spent a lot of time in hospital, a lot of time in hospital. And I think I've never really listened to, and I don't know, I think I've always known that there can be another way other than just having to rely on medicine. I completely believe in medicine when you have to have it, break a leg, go to hospital, appendicitis, go to hospital. But I don't know, I've always eked out other ways to try and listen to my body rather than just take the pills.
Yeah, we're the same. I grew up in Africa, and everything was. I used to hang around with the kids in Africa. I would always bring snakes home and animals home, and I didn't want to wear clothes anytime. I was running around like a little, naked half the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and that's where I learned. I learned bushcraft and very much from a young age, very into sort of survival. And like yourself, I always wanted to know. My sister said if you gave me a train, I'd take it apart, or a radio, I'd take it apart because I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted
Yeah.
to understand what was it that made it work. And I suppose most of my life has been spent looking for the ultimate healing. And the problem that I find, I don't know if you found this, but in that journey, sometimes it feels like you come across this book that promises something, but it's the same rehashed thing. And ultimately, you might get one paragraph, you learn something new, and the rest you go, you're not really telling him anything new. It's that
Mm-mm.
veil that you're seeking. And probably the closest recently I came across was the Emerald Tablets of Thoth,
Mm.
the Atlantean. And there's a lot of esotericism related around them. And Thoth was meant to be a channel through from the times of Atlantis.
Mm.
And it was meant to be about how to overcome the ego and the connection and the trap to the physical form.
Okay, wow.
So
Amazing.
that's I really recommend that as a book to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna look into
yeah,
that.
it's very
Sure.
good. It's written in a way the traditional esoteric teaching was to the student would come to the master. The master wouldn't just, well, when the student is ready, the master will appear. I actually wrote a book called that.
Mm.
And the idea is that you rock up when it's the exact right moment. The universe creates the master and brings it into your life. The true teaching of a master is you don't know you're being taught.
Yeah.
So in India, they say if you find the guru, shoot the guru because there's a guru in every street corner, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I think that is very much been my thing. And when I was looking at your clips on YouTube, you're very passionate about what you do, and that really comes across.
Mm.
You're not dumbing yourself down to fit the status quo. I'm on TikTok like yourself, and I don't go on there to get followers. I go on there because I'm passionate about something, and if people don't want to follow me, that's fine. That's okay. I'd rather have five people that are attentive than 5,000
Yeah.
people who aren't interested. And one of the things that I'm going to ask you this question. I was watching all your videos. Georgie, let's talk about tofu.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's talk about tofu.
Because
Well,
you have inspired me.
well, tofu is a funny one because actually it has everything set against it. I think it looks pretty revolting. It's got blancmange kind of written all over it. And actually, often when you go to a Chinese restaurant, it can taste like sponge. I don't know. I've had it moments where I'm like, ugh. But it is a complete protein. And I think that a lot of people are very fixated on protein at the moment. I mean, we go through all these fads, don't we? It's fiber, it's protein, it's all these things, five top tips. Um, and I don't think you have to have protein always in meat form, but it's quite hard to find it in other ways other than like quinoa and quite small amounts of things. And so I think if you're looking for other options, and my youngest daughter's not great on meat, so I have to think about outside the box. So adding in tofu into things can be a real good thing to do. But if you steam soft tofu, you do it well with the most beautiful like garlic and ginger and some soy and some spring onions. It's off the scale because it's just a vehicle for flavor. And if you get firm tofu, you can crisp it up. And I mean, anything crispy with a sweet kind of, what's that? Yasai umami flavored dressing is off the scale, delicious. So you're kind of tricking yourself into eating something that's really good for you. And I think a lot of what I do is trying to get people to open their mind up to other things. I have actually got tofu in my fridge. I got it in my store cupboard. I don't have it the whole time, but I think it's quite a good thing to have up your sleeve. Again, so it's educating people on things that they might otherwise just go no to. But I would always get a good quality tofu because organic soy is kind of necessary because it gets very heavily sprayed.
Yeah, what inspired me from looking on you talking about tofu, can you explain about the gummies? Because I thought I'm going to do that. I'm really going to do that. The only thing I didn't understand, with it, when you explain how to do it, you sprinkle the
Gelatin.
gelatin on the top. You don't mix it in.
Yeah, so gelatin generally, things have changed a lot actually in the last 10-ish years of how we cook, but the way that I was traditionally taught was generally you have a wet base and then you sprinkle over the gelatin powder or granules and it does something called sponge. And you have to let it sit there for about 5 minutes. And it looks, to begin with, it looks like powder. Then, as you know, literally, if you imagine what just happens with a sponge, it goes a bit more translucent and it goes into the liquid, but it becomes quite solid. And that's kind of allowing it to open up and to rehydrate, I guess. And then very gently, you want to heat the gelatin. And you do it gently because boiling it can denature it and make it not work. So there is a bit of a process to it. There are people out there that do it different ways. It kind of depends on what gelatin you have, but generally speaking, it can be quite granular, especially if it's a good quality one. They're normally a little bit more granular, so you need to sponge it a bit more. But I've seen all sorts of people doing all sorts of different things. But I think sponging is the best way and a
Because
gentle heat.
because you added, I like the fact that you added goji berries to it. You added, what is it, apple juice,
Turmeric, spices.
the
Yeah,
ginger,
yeah.
which is really good. So you don't actually boil it. You just heat,
No, just really
simmer.
gently heat it, and then it literally
Okay.
just melts, like watching something just disappear and melt into
Yeah.
it. I actually don't even stir it because then you might potentially change the ratios that's gone inside. It all might just stick to your wooden spoon, for example.
Okay.
You just give it a swirl around in your pan, just gently. You can even tap the bottom of your pan because it should be like warm enough that it's not boiling. To give it a swirl around, and all the bits should go. If they don't, you could get a little sauce whisk out or a bit of a spoon to give it a bit of a shimmy, and it should all dissolve. But yeah, I think it's trying to get clever with ingredients. I think the other day I actually made, I've got it behind me, something called a gut sprinkle because there's all these things out there that are pretty expensive to boost your microbiome and increase your diversity. Literally, all you need to do is get a jam jar and shove lots of different ingredients you've already got in your cupboard in, and you've made your own sprinkle. But people often forget about spices. And again, going back to Indian cooking, spices are so wonderful, not just because they taste delicious, but they've got so many health benefits to them. But I think when you're reintroduced to spices and you have them more in your diet, they're so happy making. A spice is like fresh coriander, fresh cumin, toasted. Oh, it's delicious when you have that in something. It's like a real woof. So I love trying to bring all sorts of things back again, just to remind we're also busy. So to remember to have some turmeric in something, it's quite easy to go, oh, I can't really be bothered. And then you have it and you're like, oh, I quite like that, you know? So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd always think of the excuse when people say that they're too busy because you need to eat,
Yeah.
and food is really important. And I a lot of my patients when they come to me, I look at their tongue and I do a
Mm.
lot of tongue diagnosis. And when I see that the liver needs to detox, I say ginger, hot water, lemon, and honey.
Mm.
Obviously, Manuka honey if you can, lemon, organic ginger if you can. But what I say to them when they say about being busy, I said, look, I know what life's like. What you do is grate the ginger at night, teaspoonful of honey. So when you wake up in the morning, hot water, lemon. So there's no
Very cool.
kind of really excuse for that. I think that everything's go, 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 go constantly, and it's even this reconnection with food. So one of the ones that, again, you did a post on this, and I'm really glad you did because it's something I'm very, very into, is polyphenols and olive oil. So I never cook with olive oil. I don't know
Mm.
your view on that, but I never cook with it. I cook with avocado or coconut, but I
Mhm.
don't heat. I'll have it cool.
Mm.
Talk to me a little bit about olive oil, your views on it.
Actually, I do cook with olive oil. Because I still go by the principle of the Mediterranean diet and the fact that they love using olive oil, but I make sure that it's a good quality one. I would never want to make it unbelievably hot. I don't want to make any oil unbelievably hot, because it does denature the oil. You can see it. I always, whenever I teach people, try to get them to kind of understand the equipment that they're using. And when an oil begins to smoke, it's angry, and it often will smell kind of almost rancid. I don't want to be eating anything like that. So it's becoming aware of what it is that you're doing and respecting, I guess. It's similar to like an artist painting. You don't just splodge things on a palette. You try and understand it. You kind of almost become one with it, which I know sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's getting into the kind of flow of the cooking. Um, and something like coconut oil, I use coconut oil, I've got avocado oil, I have olive oil, in varying different qualities. I think there was a time where coconut oil became, about 10 years ago, the biggest thing in the whole world. And everybody was talking about how amazing coconut oil was. And I get it. It's like, again, going back to all these fads that we have. I get it. It is a really good oil, but it's also a saturated fat. So, it can sit quite heavily on the body, if you're not aware of saturated fats. Um, and I think it can also be quite heavily processed coconut oils because there are ones that they've taken the taste of coconut out, which obviously is quite nice if you're cooking a meat dish. You might not want your meat to taste of coconut, um, but it would have been more processed. So it's kind of choosing your battles to a certain extent. But yeah, my olive oil of choice is ones that are in a container that would be, most olive oil comes in a dark green bottle to keep the sunlight out, which makes sense because the polyphenols are affected by sunlight and air exposure. So bottles actually we're realizing maybe not the best thing in the world because most people have got their olive oil lying around quite a long time, probably in direct sunlight somewhere in their kitchen. So you can get things that come like in a backpack, and are completely sealed. In fact, I've got this right next door to me. This is a wooden box that's got the backpack inside. And they've tested this olive oil. It's a company called Bonner. They've tested the olive oil and it's literally as if it's just been pressed, the polyphenol content, which is great for lots of reasons, high antioxidants, etc. And your gut. So yeah, I like to educate people on lots of different oils, but also not to scare people, sunflower oil, rapeseed oils. I think people get a bit misled by things like rapeseed oil. We live in Britain and we're surrounded by rape right now. It's fields of yellow everywhere. So rapeseed is great if it's cold pressed and not been ultra highly processed. But you look at most hummuses and things like that, they'll also rapeseed, and it's not necessarily the rapeseed oil that we want. That's the megally processed stuff. So just being aware of it. But it is hard. I think we're living in a time where our food has been so tampered with. I can't really believe how much it's been allowed to be so tampered with. That I think people are so confused as to what they can and can't eat. I remember not long ago having some puff pastry, and I love puff pastry. A good quality puff pastry is beautiful, and I had one from this company called Dorset Pastry, beautiful, beautifully made. And I got like a your just roll puff pastry as well. And I looked at the back of the packet, And I remember looking up one of the E numbers on it and thinking, I wonder what that is. And it's it doesn't have it on there anymore, so it must have changed something. But it said derivatives of animal hair and fur. And I was like, right, so that's in my puff pastry. What? How did someone even think where did that even come from? I got a really good idea. Let's just get some fur, some feathers, grind it all up, and shove that in my puff pastry. I think what's happening to our food is extraordinary, but it's like that, I guess, across lots of many different systems. But oils is a bit of a melting pot. Another one that you might use also is ghee. Ghee, I think, is lovely, good quality as well, a nice organic ghee. Um, but yeah, looking after your oils, making sure that they come from good people, and I think we are also living in a time, not that I ever really wanted to say things like this. Well, you have to trust your brands. Like you have to trust them like they're good friends. Like you can trust them. Um, because I think.
That's a difficult one, isn't it? The trusting of brands. I mean,
Mm,
I've been approached by many people to sponsor my podcast, for example.
mm,
The biggest dilemma I have with any sponsor is it needs to be ethical. It needs to be cost effective for anybody listening to my podcast because I'm aware of what's going on out there right now.
mm,
But I can't put my name behind something ultimately if I don't believe in the brand. If I don't believe I can have it on my skin or in my mouth, and
mm,
it's gonna, I won't have it. And I think that's why with a lot of patients now, when I'm working with antioxidants, for example, the biggest problem is the omega sixes. It's in everything.
yeah,
And as you know, omega-6 creates inflammation. We need a certain amount of it.
yeah.
But most people that I'm blood testing against omega-3, omega-6, we're coming up with a ratio of 26 to 1.
Wow.
And that's really high. So a lot of people are presenting with musculoskeletal problems or depression, and their whole body's inflamed.
Mm,
So they then go to the doctor. The doctor gives them an anti-inflammatory. They get depressed because food can affect your moods, and it's this kind of spiral down and down when really I always look at the chemical, physical, emotional, think of the pyramid, and the base of the
mm,
pyramid is what often people present when they come to me, but there's also the chemical, and
mm,
the
mm,
chemistry side of it. And so I think that it's really interesting when you're talking about the polyphenols, because that's something which the disconnect is either we give something a big name, so then people goes poly what,
mm,
or we're not educated about it. And the advertising, if I walk up Tunbridge Wells High Street, for example, there's literally fizzy drinks, pizzas, all this sort of stuff.
mm,
And even when I've been to, I won't name the particular
mm,
place, but you'll know what I'm talking about. When I stop over at a service station, there's a very well-known burger place.
mm,
You know the one I mean. And there's one that's not so well known. The one that's not so well known is very healthy, and yet
mm,
the people will still go and queue in the one that's unhealthy.
mm,
And
mm,
I think it comes and harks back to what you originally said about the addiction. I know that one molecule of sugar will burn up 28 molecules of magnesium, and
mm,
then people are coming to me with cramp. And
mm.
so when I look at your videos, you remind me of um, a modern alchemist
Thanks.
because food is alchemy, right?
Yeah, it
It
has
it it
yeah.
it, it really is.
Yeah.
So I think that the disconnect with food is incredibly powerful advertising. What's your view on the ethical side of that?
Well, on the advertising side of food,
Mm,
I think it's changing a lot. I think that I'm hoping there's lots of kind of bubbling up resurgence of smaller companies coming up and getting their power through other like-minded people. I feel like energetically people are creating communities within communities and then getting bigger that way. I feel like I feel like across the board there feels like a real dismantling of systems, um, which is unsettling. I think that's probably why a lot of people are feeling very unsettled at the moment. It does feel energetically that things aren't that hunky-dory. Um, So I think people are questioning the bigger the bigger brands, and rightly so. I think bigger brands then need to step up and do more. I think there's a lot more B Corp places, which is amazing. But I also think that sadly, a lot of the bigger companies can get away with kind of slightly saying they're doing the ethical thing, paying someone to make them sound ethical, but still carry on being pretty unethical. Again, it all comes down to money and this want for money and power. Um, so I don't know. I think the world of social media is quite funny too because I can see it more and more. I actually get sent a lot of now get sent quite a lot of things, and I won't talk about things unless I agree with them too, or like the taste, or know a bit more about the story. And it gets quite tricky after a while. I remember think when I first started that thinking, God, how nice it'd be to be sent things. And then now I'm actually like, actually, I don't really want to be sent things because there's often a motive behind it. People want me to talk about them, and they'll say that I don't, but energetically, you know that they do. And it's a funny one. I think you have to choose again consciously, um, and all of these things require time. You know, if you really want to be conscious about the brands that you're choosing, it requires basically a lifestyle shift and change. And most people don't want to do that because it's effort and time. And that's why a lot of what I do is trying to educate people on ways to bring about simple changes rather than it being overwhelming, you know, and not allowing it all to be really boring and hard and depressing because actually it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't always have to be really expensive either. I mean, a lot of it does sit in a more expensive category, but it doesn't have to be more time consuming or expensive, but it does require attention. Yeah.
I think so, and I think that again back to your point about the chaos in the world right now. I think that we have a really strange view on chaos. The Chinese would have a different view on chaos, that chaos is a necessity for
Mm,
change. And I think the Aboriginals, they would purposefully burn parts of the bush, same in South Africa. And in order they do that because it clears away the weeds, the ash fertilizes the ground, and then you actually things grow.
mm,
And I think that in this time that we're living with everything that's going on with Iran and everything else like that,
mm.
I think there is a backlash. I think there is the, out of the chaos, out of the disorder comes order, as they say.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely starting to happen. And and there are more people like you that are being conscious, honest, and ethical about food, you know. So when I look at this, where is your drive? Where are you going? Let's say, what do you see for yourself? What would your dream for this be?
I think if you'd asked me a few years ago, it was just to grow my following because I think that's what I felt that I needed to do in order to be seen more. And I'm realizing more and more that isn't the case. What you want is your people behind you, you know, to create a tribe, to create a community. I think community really is so important. Um, I want to be in touch with as many people as possible, because I love being in touch with people, and I hope to a certain extent inspiring or showing them how change can really happen in your life. I know that it has massively happened. One thing I haven't really spoken about is I didn't have a good relationship with food as a child. I was very much borderline anorexic from about 13, 14, and really didn't know how to feed myself or look after myself. And I've had to ultimately teach myself and start all over again to build up this trust and faith in my own ability. And yeah, of course, there are times where I'll go, oh God, have I got it all wrong? Or, you know, old stories will come in. But I know from where I am now compared to where I used to be that change, for the better in terms of, like you said before, the word empowerment is possible. Um, so my hope is to really expand, to create a sturdy, loving community and to put more good and kindness into the world. I know that sounds a bit kind of vague, but I know that through what I do, I instill that in my clients, and that I know energetically that ripple, that good, that happiness goes out to other people. And I think the world needs more of it. Um, but if I wanted to go into like number crunching and all the rest of it, I've become a lot more business minded because I found that up until probably 2 years ago, I used to give my energy away freely. And now I've realized that I have to start monetizing and putting all the things that I've learned into proper practice because it has to be reciprocal. Otherwise, it's just draining. And that is exciting, actually. It's the first time I've ever really truly believed that I could do that. And that's really where the empowerment piece comes in. Yeah. And I also think that women, it's very easy to lose yourself as a woman, especially when you have children. You give so much. I'm not saying men don't, because they do, but I think it's even easier when you have children and get married, and you can kind of go down a path that you might believe to be the right one, but actually it might not necessarily be. So I often work with a lot of women that know that they've got a bit lost and want
Mm.
to find another way back.
I
Um,
think that's true, and before we kind of went live, I talked about the fact that that I've got a strong female influence in my life,
mm,
and one of the things that I find really interesting is watching my mother as a single mother because she was a very smart woman. She was a journalist and an editor for a well-known magazine, and what happened is that I saw this empowerment of women going into the workplace. But then what I saw was not only did they go to the workplace, but they still had to be the mother, they still had to be the wife. And so they took on double
mm,
their workload,
mm.
And so I'm not saying again, I agree with you, men have their own things that they've got to do. I
Yeah.
think a lot of men have lost their, like I say, the only hunting that a man does is, goes to the supermarket and gets some wrapped meat or something like
Mm,
that.
mm, mm.
But I think with the family, with mobile phones and everything else like that, there's a disconnect completely. And food is the one time that I find man, woman, or partner,
Mm, mm.
children, you come together.
Yeah.
And something recently I heard, which really, it's something I'm going to try to implement in our household, is if you look at Emoto's work on water and energy.
Mm, mm,
So basically, water holds energy and the body's 70% water, which is that at the dinner table, there is no negative communication. Because
mm,
by empowering that water or that food or that negativity, you then ingesting that.
mm, mm.
So I think it's a really lovely thing to do. And that's another thing I like about what you're doing is you did one on, what was it, rhubarb.
Yeah, yeah,
And I really
yeah,
I like that because Hippocrates was medicine be thy food and food be thy medicine.
yeah.
Um, Tell me about that because the thing that really stood out to that, and I thought, wow, that's exactly what I think, which is seasonal eating. Tell me about seasonal eating.
Well, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, this disconnect, seasonal eating is probably one of the easiest things we can be doing if we realize what season we're in. It's quite easy to look up and kind of go, are we in November? Oh no, I don't think we are. I think we're in April, And I love bringing in seasonality because it's that simple. Again, it's empowering. It's nothing better than going foraging for some blackberries with your children or making a nice crumble in the autumn. But you also, when you understand food, realize that they are literally giving you an immune boost. All those berries are full of antioxidants. The apple full of little bits of, fiber that's brilliant for all creating good stools, etc. So nature is literally there the whole time going, I'm here, I'm here. I mean, soon we're going to have elderflowers. I mean, there's nothing better than elderflower cordial. I mean, it's just so, and then rhubarb, you put rhubarb and elderflowers and some rose petals into your cordial and you get the most beautiful cordial. So I love seasonal eating. I think I don't think actually there's much better. In fact, we have a village fair here. I'm very lucky. They often ask me to judge it. Everybody comes in with their produce from the village, all their courgettes lined up and their potatoes. And I get to do all the cakes and the bakes with my daughter. We go and do it together. And most of them have got a seasonal theme to them because everyone's brought in their own produce. And for me, it's one of the most exciting, fun days of my entire year. I'm in an old, crappy tent in a field, but everybody that's brought their stuff in that day are so excited. What's the judges going to write on their pamphlet? And, was my egg going to be my egg or her egg yolk was a different color to my egg yolk? And there's something amazing about, again, this community sense. It's just so exciting. But I think we miss a trick. I think when we're rushing around and not connecting with the seasons. And it can be anything. Right now, there's that sticky weed that's out. We put that in the water or cleavers that is brilliant for your lymphatic system. I mean, there's so many things outside. All the herbs outside that are beautiful. Elderberries when it turns autumnal is endless. And you don't have to be a forager, but just knowing a few of these things is wonderful. And again, you don't have to live in the countryside. I mean, a lot of people have got these lovely herbs growing in their houses. I love living around living things, and I know it's really good for regulating the nervous system. So again, I just think it's brings in the whole energy of aliveness.
It does, and I go foraging for sloes,
Oh,
and I put them in gin, and I got a really
mm.
really good tip once, which was that because what you're meant to do is titrate, shake the bottle once in a while. And somebody said to me, it's really easy. What you do is you put it in the back of your car in a box, and every time you drive and brake, and but
Yeah.
even mead was found in the pyramids. It's one of the probably the first alcohol ever, you
Mm.
know. But it
Yeah.
takes patience and it takes time. But once you get involved in something like that, or even having bees, you realize the work that goes in,
So
you
I'm a
know.
beekeeper. I don't know if you know that.
No, okay.
So I've got a couple of beehives, and I started about 5 years ago. Oh, it was my son's seventh birth. No, quite long. Maybe it was seven. It's quite a long time ago. He's now 13. Maybe 7 years ago. Um, I have something called a worry hive, which is actually I'm a natural beekeeper, so I literally provide them with their house, and I don't feed them, and I let them do their thing. And if the hive is heavy enough before at the right time around September, October time before they start hibernating, I will take some honey away, but only if it's good for the hive. Otherwise, it will kill the hive ultimately. And my mum's biggest fear in the whole world is bees. So I grew up in a household of wasps, flies, bees as being like the complete enemy. So it couldn't be more ironic than I'm a beekeeper. Um, but I've had to learn, I was petrified to begin with. I now could go up to a hive without necessarily being suited. I mean, I'd probably want one around my face, but I feel much more confident around bees. Bees are brutal. I mean, they are, and if anybody not working properly in the hive, they will take you out, rip you to pieces, and shove you off the doorstep. They're fascinating to watch. Again, I'm lucky that there's not much of a skill involved. I provide the housing, occasionally check on them. And then, but the honey is incredible. You're talking about Manuka. It's got pockets of propolis, of pollen, chalky. I mean, it's nothing like you'd ever get in a perfectly clear little box of comb. It's like orange and brown and yellow and different flavors in all the little places. It is completely medicinal. Um, and again, that's something I teach people is, honey. A lot of the honey we get in the supermarkets is just not honey. I mean, it's cut with things like brown rice syrup, and they feed the bees sugar, and basically the bees are just giving out sugar, and that's why I think a lot of our bees are dying because I always equate it. They don't have diabetes, but they get quite common. They have something called varroa, which ultimately can kill them. And the more we feed them these big blocks of fondant, I genuinely think that's one of the reasons our bees are declining. Because they're not similar to us. They're not fighting. They're not going out and doing what they normally would do, which is go and forage and get X, Y, and Z. And another slight gripe I have is when people use bee pollen. I know it's really good for you. It is really good for you. But the amount that's being mass produced, basically what they do is they put brushes along the entrance of the hive. So the bee goes in, it brushes their legs, the pollen falls off, and then the bee has to go out again many, many times. And then they would be using that pollen in their hive to feed their brood, to feed themselves, etc. So you're kind of robbing the bees every single time. And I get that it's good for you. But again, it's doing it consciously. People are buying bags of like kilos worth of pollen. That is like years worth
No,
of
no.
foraging. So
It's
again,
it's
it's just
it's wrong.
being aware.
It's so wrong in so many levels. We had bees in South Africa, and
Mhm.
they were just wild. And my fondest memories as a child was we had a centrifuge, big
Oh
centrifuge,
wow, yeah.
and we'd spin it, and the combs would be put into the centrifuge, and this honey would just drip down.
Blowing out, yeah.
That and coming home and taking a slice of biltong from maybe a cow that had died on the farm, we turned it into
Yeah.
biltong, dried meat, and chunking this thing like some sort of
Yeah.
cannibal or something like that. But I think that the bees and the animals and that respect and how something so small can be the demise of man, we're so caught up with the war and possible nuclear war and all of this stuff when actually Mother Nature is just going to go, hey, humans, get your act together because you know what? I'll just wipe you out. I personally have a belief that through various studies, whether you want to call them esoteric and that, I believe
Mm.
that we've had civilizations. Well, we know they've come, they've gone, they've come, they've gone.
Mm.
And I think that everything reaches an epoch. We see this now with, America, the empire, and then an empire falls and another one rises. And I think that I can see the world where people bit by bit are going, no, I've had enough now. I want food that tastes like food, and I want to, you know,
Yeah, I want food that tastes like food. I'm going to say something that might not be that well received, but I'd also like to live in a world. I don't think I'm a kind of devout feminist, but I do feel that we need more women in power where men are in power doing a very bad job.
I agree. And I think partly that's because women give birth, and if you give birth to something, you're less likely to want to kill it. Let's be honest.
100%.
I really,
And
I really think that.
100%. And that this is the thing is that we have all these wars going on at the moment and genocides going on. And I sit there and I'm sure you do too, going, how is this happening again? We've grown up hearing horrendous stories of World War I, World War II, and you say to yourself, oh, well, that will never happen again. But yet, and I think the common factor in this is that there are still big men, I mean, let's not name any names, but we know who they are, in power who are so wrapped up in their own ego. I think that any person in power needs to have a psychometric testing done or something that, literally has a bit of a screening process done, which I kind of can't believe that doesn't happen. And and I'm sure it's not an easy job doing any of these things, being a prime minister or a president or big person of power. But I do think, like you just said, when you give birth to something and it's literally part of who you are, death or killing something is very low down on your
No, I agree.
agenda.
I was thinking about my late mother, and once in a while she'll sort of pop into my mind. She was an amazing woman, very, very gentle, intelligent, kind. Really bad choice of men in her life, though, unfortunately.
Mm,
And I always used to think that I needed to go for women who were the opposite. And then one day I realized it was the men, not my mother, that was a problem. And then I met my
mm,
wife, who is gentle and kind, like my mother was. The
mm,
opposite. And I think that in life, I know within Chinese medicine, we talk about yin and yang, which is equivalent of hot, cold, positive, negative. I would like to see in politics almost like a bi-party, like imagine a prime minister that you split in two,
mm,
and it was
mm.
a man and a woman to bring that balance back in.
Yeah,
If you have certain things that work well together, that for example, if you take olive oil and you put, balsamic vinegar, the balsamic sinks to the bottom and the olive oil rises to the top. But when
yeah,
you then taste them with some sourdough bread, there's nothing like it. Good
yeah,
quality olive oil.
yeah.
And I think that that's what we need. We need to recognize that though they're different, that masculine and feminine energy combined,
It's
it can
just
be something amazing.
totally. And we have masculine and feminine within each of us. There's no competing to be more or less of one or the other.
Yeah.
But it is that balancing. I think ideally men are the container and they hold the woman. That's how I've kind of seen it. And the other way around. It's a reciprocal thing. Um, but yeah, I think that if I had my way, the world would be a little bit more female dominant. Not, let's say dominant's not the right word, just more of an equal balance. Um, and food would be right at the top of it all.
And
Feasting, connecting.
but
Yeah.
women were persecuted historically for being herbalists. They were persecuted for being midwives. The church came along and decided that these people who threatened men because they basically were able to cure them with herbs and stuff were persecuted. And maybe I'm naive, but I'd like to think that never before has there been a time in history where, say, for example, you and me can openly talk about these things
Mm.
and we're not considered woo-woo,
Yeah.
or kind of really out there?
But I think that's only been in the last maybe 5, 10 years.
I
Something,
agree.
I think COVID shifted things a lot, a lot. I think people of power stopped being listened to, and I think people had to go back to their own. I think one thing we haven't brought up, intuition. I think that's something that if you're kept busy enough and if you're running around looking at your phone, then guess what? You haven't got much time to tap into that. And I think that is all of our ultimate superpowers is
Yeah,
our intuition.
well, thinking people are dangerous people, right? That's why in the
Yeah.
in the Russian Revolution they got rid of all they basically got these intellects and they said, show me your hands, and if your hands were soft, that was it. You're not a worker, and we don't talk about the 20 million Russians that were exterminated. It's incredible. And back to your point about what we're capable of. There was a quote on another podcast which I like, which is, if you want to know what man's capable of, look at what man has done.
Mm,
And this idea that these things won't repeat, but the idea, as you know, of madness is to do something and keep doing it and want a different outcome. The
mm,
problem is, as long as men are constantly have the dominant role in power, nothing I think will
change.
ultimately change. I mean, it's quite interesting that my daughters said to me that, Dad, when when we were young, they said you were the one who did the nurturing. I really wanted to get them to nature, so I took them out and we went on little survival courses where we'd catch our own things, we'd make fire, and I let
Yeah.
them get grubby and covered in mud and smell
Yeah.
the earth, and I wasn't worried about the fact that they'd lick their fingers after and whatever and
Yeah.
those things. And so I had a patient come to me. It's a very funny story. This patient came to me as a very well-known person. I won't mention them obviously because of confidentiality, but put it this way, they're very well known.
Mm,
And she came to me and she brought along one of her friends, and it was at some sort of Comic Con event, I think they call it like
mm,
that. So it's where these famous people go that have been in these films, and these people rock up and they sign their autographs and all that. Anyway, so she brought him along, and said, "You've got to see this guy. He's really good." And so I'm treating this patient, and we got talking about my growing up in Africa, and um, I talked about my wife and things like this, just this flowing conversation. And
mm.
he said, I'm going to go need to correct her. I said, what do you mean you're going to correct her? He says, well, apparently she said you're really good. You're French, which I understand because I am half French, and apparently I'm gay. So so I went, oh, okay, really interesting. And I thought, actually, I took it as a compliment, but it comes back to that thing about, if you're a man and you're gentle and you have that soft side, society skews it and goes automatically, therefore you must be gay. If you're a woman and you're
Mm.
strong and you're empowering,
That'd be mad.
you must be a lesbian or something like that.
Threatening.
But
Yeah.
why is it that we can't have that quality of that gentle man, quality of that strong woman? And as long as those two come together, and I think it again, yin and yang for me,
Yeah, me too.
you know?
It's exactly the same. I couldn't agree more. And it neither should be a threat or a bad thing. Um, at all. I have two sons, and I encourage them as much as possible to be effeminate and masculine. There's neither one is right. Neither one is wrong or right. They just are what they are. They're just energies. And
Yeah,
again, you go back to food. I always say to my clients, I don't believe in good or bad. I just believe in energy. I don't believe there's a good or bad energy. Like you don't have good or bad children. They're like little sponges, and it's up to you how they grow up and develop in the world. Yes, they have their own soul.
hmm.
I get that. I agree with, but I don't believe that there's good or bad, really anything. I say that if you were stuck on the side of a mountain about to die, and you found a packet of Haribo, you'd eat the Haribo, and you'd be unbelievably grateful that you just had a packet of Haribo to survive through being rescued off the side of a mountain. Do you see what I mean? It's so
Mm,
subjective. It depends on so many things. Some parts of the world, Coca-Cola is the best drink in the whole world. It's all they can afford, and it's keeping them semi-alive. So there's a lot of stigma around food at the moment that that's bad, this is good. I get it. It's very easy to go through statistics and say, well, that has done this and it's increased that. Again, I'm sure that they're right, but it depends through what lens you're looking at it from.
I
A
think
lot of
so.
it come down
It,
to what's going really on inside your universe and what emotions you're allowing to run you.
I
Um,
think so. I mean, it's easy to be spiritual with a pound in your pocket.
yeah,
It's sort of, so I wouldn't ordain to say to somebody who, like single mom on the breadline, I know nurses are going to food banks, you know what I mean? So I'm coming along and saying, well, you've got to eat organic food. And when you're going to look at what that costs and your kid is crying because they're not getting
yeah,
enough
yeah, yeah,
food. And, so it's an unrealistic thing. But
yeah,
we as a society should also be looking at, well, why is she, first of all, why they're on the food bank for a start,
yeah.
and why is there even a choice between organic and processed? There shouldn't be, I mean, I look at farmers and milk, if you say to a farmer, how much does, well, it's a good experiment, this. Ask any of your kids, anybody how much does a pint of milk cost? They
Mm,
won't know. So
no,
therefore, put
completely different.
10p on that pint of milk, and that'll help the farmers out that are being screwed by the supermarkets, to be honest, and the amount of milk that they throw away,
But
you
this is
know.
when you're going back and saying, what is it that you want to, I mean, if I think bigger picture to the world, I know this is completely, would be considered completely bonkers to lots of people. Um, I believe most people have a passion or something they really intuitively love to do. And I also believe that we could live in a world where people were able to do what they intuitively love to do
Mm,
and did it because they like doing it. And people always say, well, what about the street cleaners, say, or people, the jobs that people don't necessarily want to do? Not saying there's anything wrong with being a street cleaner at all. I actually think that there would be people that would want to fit all roles in life once things settle down, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that want to go for the actor or the spotlight things. But once things settle down a bit, again, when you see children at schools, they all have their own little purposes, their own little things that light them up. I'd love to live in a world whereby we could just celebrate our own uniqueness, and what really lights us up, and give that to the world without it having to be centered around money, I guess. I keep on talking about money, and it's not something I thought I'd bring up at all, but I think it is something that seems to be
mm.
corroding us a little bit
I mean,
sometimes.
money is energy. It's a
Money is
flow.
energy,
It's a
totally.
flow, and this might sound crazy, but in order to empty the vessel, you have to empty it, and then to receive. And there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk about AI and fear about AI, and I don't look at it as fear. I just look at it as evolution or change.
Mm. Mm.
And when in Buddhism they say the inability to accept change is the cause of all unhappiness. And for me, AI. So what I'm hearing on the grapevine from various sources is that they're talking about this universal income. So the theory in universal income does exactly what you've said, which is you say, right, well, how much money does a person need to pay their
Mm.
mortgage to live? And that they figure out what that is. AI is getting stronger, jobs are going away. So we say, right, let's say it's £3,000 a month. So every month the government gives you £3,000. You can go off and be a surfer, an artist, whatever you like. The
Mm.
caveat to that is you have to spend the £3,000. You have to put it back. You have to empty the vessel. It has to go back into the
Okay.
system.
Mm. Mm.
And you get the three, you send it. Now, a couple of problems with this in terms of what you and I have been talking about. It relies on the honesty of humanity. In other words, suddenly they don't now double the prices of something.
Mm.
Now, if you want to go out and work and still get that money, fine. That's when you can afford the Ferrari and the this and that.
Yeah, sure.
And of course, the downside of it is the government comes in, they bring in a regulation. You say, no, I'm not going to adhere to that, and they cut your money off. So
Mm.
the problem it comes down again is to human nation, the kind of
Yeah.
the ethics of it, essentially. But it is what you're saying would be wonderful because I think a lot of people, what I call those gray men and gray women in the gray suits doing the commute, if you said to them, you don't need to go to work. I'm going to
Mm.
give you £3,000 a month. What do you want to do? I think a lot of them would wear their jeans, t-shirts, and go off and be artists,
Yeah, and that's it. I'm not for one moment against money. I'm not, but I think a lot of people spend their life chasing ultimately something money.
Yeah.
For all the right, for the reasons that make sense in their life. That's not, again, I'm not going into that, but it can be the one thing that takes them away from their passion or their true like light up moment. And I know, again, going back to your point, it's easy to say things like that. You could be a single mother who needs to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not going into the various areas, but yeah, I think it's a money is energy. So as I said,
Yeah.
I'm not not against money at all, but I do think that in the world of social media, there's a lot of people out there that just are very hell bent on, I don't know, being a certain way, looking a certain way, making a lot of money. And I think there are a lot
Yeah.
of very easily influenced young people who just think that that's what you got to do in order to succeed or to achieve. And I think that messaging is quite dangerous
I think so, and
for
also,
young people.
but I also think that one of the things that strikes me listening to you, I've had this said of me, which is essentially the way that a person talks, there are assumptions made. So I've had people assume that I've been to Cambridge, assume that I've had public education,
Mm,
assume that I come from a certain class. Even had somebody on one of my TikToks saying, "Oh, it's okay for you. You probably went to private school." And I said, "Oh, really? I went to private school. Did I go? And where did I go?" They said, "Oh, probably Oxford or Cambridge or something." You know what I mean? That sort of
yeah, yeah.
assumption. And we've also got to get away from that in the same sense if somebody's got a real East End accent,
Mm, mm,
we make other assumptions, and yet
mm,
some of the
mm.
most successful people, talk like Del Boy from Fools and
Yeah,
Horses. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And some
yeah,
of the most unsuccessful people talk like they come from, the Queen's English, that sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
so
Exactly.
it is breaking those. So how does I want to get back really to you in terms of how do we get people to come to you? What does that look like? So people want to reach out to you. What does that look like? How do we make that happen?
So well, actually, I don't know when this is going out, but I've got a free Sri Lankan class happening this week, but this might not be out in time. On Thursday, I'm doing a free cook along, and I do free cook alongs sometimes just to people to get to experience what I'm like to work with. I love cooking, so I love just being there and explaining it all. So we're doing delicious Sri Lankan food this week. I have something called my gold membership, which is £20 a month, where people come and join me live and cook together. But within that, you get loads of extra bits like breathwork sessions or discount codes or various things. I've got a pretty amazing black book that I've managed to build up over the years.
When's the free cook along? When is that?
The free cook along is this Thursday. I've
What
got two
time?
sessions. One is at 10 in the morning,
Yeah.
10:30, and then the other one is 2 in the afternoon. There'll probably be an hour and a half each
Okay, so
session.
what I'll do is I'll take a clip from this and I'll put it on
Okay,
TikTok. Great,
amazing. That'd be
brilliant.
amazing. And then I have my conscious cooking, which runs actually over the whole year, but it's split into 5 modules. It works with the traditional Chinese medicine elements. So currently we're in the wood, which is spring. I'm about to go into fire, which is all about summer and eating according to that time of year. So yeah, that starts at the end of May. And that is again live cook-alongs online with guest speakers that come in to talk about that particular time. So coming up, we're talking about the nervous system quite a lot. Um, and then in-person things like sourdough workshops and coming to come and get your hands dirty in real life with me.
It's a great way to, and in terms of contacting you, you're okay for
So
people
yeah,
to reach out?
I'm on Instagram as Georgie_Soskin.
Yeah.
TikTok, Little Plough Kitchen was kind of my old name, but the two come
I like
together.
the Little Plough Kitchen actually.
Yeah,
It's nice.
it's a goodie. And then I have my website, which is Georgie Soskin or Little Plough Kitchen. Both domains work.
Okay, so that's Georgie and then it's Soskin.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so Georgie Soskin at AOL, or what do you say?
At
At
hotmail.com.
hotmail.com. Okay,
Yeah,
so if anybody wants to reach out. Cool.
yeah.
Okay, well, we come to that point in the show where I ask all my guests to tell me a favorite quote, but as ever, why? Why that favorite quote? What's your favorite quote and why have you chosen it?
So mine is actually Sirius Black from Harry Potter. He said, we've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are." And I think most of this conversation probably centers around that. Um, I think that the light inside of us shines out of us. And we have choices every day that we can make. Um, and it's not about making good or bad or right or wrong, but it's again going back to that intuition. And I guess life is just made up of choices. So I really love that quote. And I, I think most of what I really center around is love. I think all that life is our experience with love. And I know what a wonderful and powerful thing it can be to feel love, to give love. Um, and yeah, I think that's all I really want to do in my life is to feel
Mm.
loved, to give love.
And it's the only thing you can take with you.
Yeah.
It's near-death experiences. I've come across one guy had this, he was the youngest professor and he thought he was fantastic. He had this near-death experience and on the other side, he's going on about it and they really weren't interested. They were interested in the fact that actually, but what about that student? Look, they showed him a reflection of the student he was really horrible to, So ultimately, it's what we do in terms of, love to others.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about the light. I think that, light and dark can't inhabit the same space. If the light gets brighter, the dark goes. If the dark gets darker, the light goes. And it
Mm.
is that constant choice, isn't it? Every day,
Yeah.
But also don't beat yourself up about it because none of us are perfect. We're just humans, having a human experience, right? We're human being,
Yeah.
and
But we live in a time where I think so much is about good vibes only.
yeah,
And it's okay to have some dark in you.
it is.
Everybody does, you know.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm always going to say normal. There's no such thing as normal.
No,
It is
no,
what it is. But thank you so much. I've really
that's
enjoyed
okay.
chatting. I think I could carry on for hours
I
longer.
know, I know. I love conversations that just flow. And this
Yeah.
has definitely been one of these. Great. Listen, I'm gonna get this out hopefully in the next couple of days actually.
Okay.
And it'll be out there and you can tell all your people about it. Be
Thank
brilliant.
you. I will. Yeah.
But yeah, lovely to chat and we'll definitely we'll catch up soon. Yeah. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Take
Pleasure.
care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.